report, one Jew replacing another.
I've been promising this video for a while now, and it's finally time to talk about Ben Shapiro. Let me begin by saying that I used to be a big Ben Shapiro fan. I listened to his radio show nearly every day on 770 KTTH, my local talk radio station. And then, up through 2016, I really enjoyed listening to his podcasts. But one
So what we're dealing with today is we're not going to go through the whole thing. You can watch the whole video. It's not a horrible video, but I do have some criticism. Is James Allsup, and James Allsup, I believe, is a former college Republican leader from maybe it was Washington State, and I do watch a lot of his videos, and I think his videos are pretty good most of the time. And he's doing a takedown on Ben Shapiro, who most people, of course, call Ben Shapiro because that's how he pronounces his name. I don't give a fuck how Ben Shapiro or Shapiro pronounces his name. I think he's vastly overrated at times. But yeah, I think both of them, Allsup and Shapiro, have very they're both very good at what they do, which is basically internet punditry, which is kind of what I do too. So I think that there's a lot of areas where my views overlap with theirs. I'm kind of doing criticism on the right and the left here. So for the first few minutes, he goes through some of the things where he talks a little about Ben Shapiro's irrational, his irrational statements all the time that, oh, I'm a conservative, but, I'm not really into Donald Trump or whatever. So let's listen to a little bit.
In the case, this is standard operating procedure, and Lewandowski was in the right to protect the candidate. For her part, Fields claimed that she was viciously and violently dragged down by her arm, and that Lewandowski tried to, quote, forcefully throw her, a reporter, to the ground. A pretty horrible.
So what he's referring to, okay, sorry for skipping ahead, is that Michelle Fields, who was a Breitbart reporter, got into a scuffle with Corey Lewandowski at the time, who was the Trump campaign manager. And that was one of the triggers for Ben Shapiro leaving Breitbart. And in the opinion of Allsup, and I think after a Secret Service investigation, Lewandowski, it turned out, was not behaving illegally or unlawfully or anything. Fields had kind of violated a Secret Service cordon. So that was one of that was some news for me, because I really hadn't cared much about Shapiro and Breitbart. But back in 2016, let me explain something. I had certainly I was opposed to the Democrats, but I wasn't really a staunch ideological follower of any of these movements like Shapiro and Allsup's, which are pretty similar still, but you'll see there's some pretty big differences by now. The fact is that this kind of, I thought, was a stupid episode, but back then it was a beginning of a break on the right, and it was a break between people who are staunch conservatives, who are willing to put aside a lot of the eccentric issues with Donald Trump, and those that couldn't accept them. The people who, to this day, a lot of them, the diehards, are called the Never Trumpers. People like Bill Kristol, people like, or you could even say Ron Paul is a Never Trumper if you want to, because he's a hardcore libertarian. So that was really one of the criticisms that Allsup goes into. Let's watch here.
Asset, in this case, Trump. But Ben Shapiro, then the editor-at-large at Breitbart, seeking an opportunity to destroy Donald Trump's, in his words, lying campaign, decided to use this as a vector by which to attack Trump and the Trump campaign. He did an interview with Thomas Roberts of MSNBC in March of 2016 and claimed that Fields was telling the truth, despite video evidence to the contrary. And when Breitbart sided with Lewandowski over Fields, Shapiro rage quit his position at Breitbart and took shots at Trump, Steve Bannon, and everyone else he could on his way out. This, for myself and many people, was a pivotal moment.
So Ben Shapiro, in my opinion, is of he's of this particular mold of conservative. who believes that you have to really always be some sort of ideological savant or something. And I don't really know what the hell that means. The fact is that a lot of people have opinions on all sorts of things that don't necessarily jive with one another. You know, there's people who happen to be, you know, very very big on religious liberty, but for some reason they're against you know whatever the hell it is, the drug legalization. You know, there's a lot of different types of belief systems within American conservatism. By the way, there's a lot of different belief systems within leftism. There are Christian Marxists. It's not as if you can't. It's not if you, as if you can't be one. It's a bit confusing because Marx was kind of a very anti-religious person, but these types of things exist, and Shapiro's entire bag is trying to prove how he's more of a purist at certain issues than anybody he's debating, and he does get into trouble here. And James Allsup does pick into he picks into one huge chink in his armor of the Ben Shapiro philosophy that I think is, it's accurate criticism, but I would say that Ben Shapiro being wrong doesn't make James Allsup correct in his analysis.
It's where the extent of Shapiro's anti-Trump bias began to become clear. Why would Ben Shapiro, someone that claims to hold facts above feelings, take the side of a woman lying about being physically abused by Trump's campaign manager? Well, to hurt Trump, of course. It's no secret that Shapiro's website, Daily Wire, was given startup capital by Texas oil billionaires Ferris and Dan Wilkes. These are the same Wilkes brothers that in 2015 gave $15 million in funding to a pro-Ted Cruz super PAC. Curious.
Okay, so that sets up some of the more partisan issues of why Ben Shapiro was able to obtain a platform after leaving Breitbart. Now, the Daily Wire, I think, existed prior to Shapiro leaving Breitbart, but I don't think it was very strong. I think Andrew Klavan is the guy who founded it, who is Christian and very strong evangelical Christian, and also a number of their other contributors they're much more about religion and Christianity than they are. Although Shapiro is Orthodox Jewish, but a lot of the other people, the majority of the other people, are either Catholic or other types of Christian. Michael Knowles is Catholic. You have another person on that staff is Matt Walsh, I believe is his name. And of course you have Andrew Klavan and I'm not sure who else is on. And to be honest with you, I think the Daily Wire produces some good news, and I think Breitbart does. And I just judge it based on what I can glean out of it. I don't really care necessarily if they have an ideological bent. I also read left-wing news, by the way. Those of you that will be watching from the left, I do read The Intercept sometimes. I don't like reading it, but I do. And sometimes their articles are good. And sometimes they're complete shit. So, you have to really just keep an open mind about it. In any case, what he starts to go after Shapiro for is a different issue.
And promoted Cruz. Now, let's not get too far afield here. The purpose of this video is not to rehash the 2016 Republican primaries or the intra-party conflicts that emerged as a result. In today's video, we're going to hear two stories, two sets of ideas and policies for how a nation's demographics and borders should be managed. Both stories are written by Ben Shapiro. In one story, Shapiro describes strong border controls and ethnic homogeneity as essential, the basis of a nation, integral for any nation that wants to defend its people. And in the other story, strong immigration controls become less important. The economy is the priority. Ethnic and racial identity politics are evil and divisive, things that should be tamped down and ignored. And demographics, they don't really matter at all. Let's begin with the second story. Let's begin by looking at how Ben Shapiro talks about the United States, the American demographic situation, and immigration into the United States. One of Ben's most famous tweets is one he put out in June of 2017, where he said, quote, "I don't give a damn about the so-called browning of America," referring, of course, to America's changing racial demographics, and the fact that America has gone from being an 85% European-American country in the 1960s to a country where European Americans will be the minority by the 2040 or so.
This sets up the real issue that James Allsup has with Ben Shapiro. And I don't know enough about James Allsup, and I'm not going to claim to know whether he is one of these alt-right people or whether he's simply an American. I think he is sort of an ethnic white nationalist, but I'm not sure. And if I'm wrong about it, I'll be willing to admit it. You can put in the comments if you know otherwise. You know, I'll admit I'm just trying to comment on this video itself. This isn't really an attack on James Allsup. And by the way, Ben Shapiro, if you're a fan of his, again, I don't want this to be just an attack on Ben Shapiro, who I think is wrong on a number of these issues too. But James Allsup's issue with Ben Shapiro is that he doesn't care about immigration into this country by a lot of non-white people. Now, full confession here, I don't really care, for example, that we have a lot of people coming to the U.S. if they're, of course, if there's a legal process involved and, we're not into all these shenanigans about, oh, it's good for the economy or whatever. If people want to come to America and they follow legal processes and they're qualified for certain jobs, I do not care. I don't care. I do not care. I do agree to a certain extent with Ben Shapiro here. Okay? I don't think that necessarily if you come from a country like Sri Lanka or, fucking Chile or something, I don't think that I have a reason to care necessarily. I think that it's a larger issue than what country you come from and what racial group you're a part of. So here we see a divergence between what these people find is important for America. James Allsup is going to make the case that European Americans are the ones who sustain conservative beliefs and lifestyles, and Ben Shapiro for America will claim that it's not an issue of race. Okay, and again, we can't go through the whole thing because the video can't be super long. But let me put it this way. Allsup does catch Shapiro in a big contradiction.
Color doesn't matter. Ideology does. Now, astute observers of sociology and political science will note from the outset that there are problems with this position. Shapiro claims not to care. In fact, he doesn't give a damn if America becomes majority-minority. That wouldn't matter to Ben. As long as there are conservatives that support his vision of conservatism, low taxes and a strong military, that is A-okay with him. But of course, as we all know...
So this is a misrepresentation of what Shapiro means, because he's filming... or he's using found footage of this is a mall in Minnesota, I believe, where there's a lot of Somali Americans. And that's what Shapiro isn't saying, that you should let literally every person into the country who wants to come here. Because obviously if you let everybody in Somalia come here, there won't be anybody left there. And this is a bit of a straw man argument. Is one of the few areas where I'll defend Shapiro's position as far as his dishonesty. He does not claim that literally every person in Somalia can come here. What he is claiming is that, there's people who come here who believe in the American dream and American values and capitalism from various different countries. They don't necessarily have to come from Sweden or from, I don't know, Italy, whatever, European countries. There could be people, and there are people who I happen to know who are Mexican or Central American who believe in conservatism and have become conservative, yada, yada, yada. In any case, James Allsup.
America's demographic shift comes with an unavoidable political shift. You've heard the numbers by now, but let's refresh again. The vast majority of non-European Americans believe in bigger government and more social programs. The Second Amendment, for example, 66% of blacks...
So he's talking about people, black Americans, wanting greater social services. Well, whose fault is that? Whose fault is that? They didn't come to America, this generation. Most of black America was born here. Okay? And therefore, what does this have? So what he's trying to do, Allsup, is trying to make this case that black Americans inherently want social democracy or socialism, which is, it's not the case. There's a large, of course, the polling, it indicates that a substantial percentage of them absolutely do. But if there's even 10% that don't, then what you're doing is you're playing with the idea. You're trying to make the case that proportionally every race has a certain amount of political beliefs. Therefore, we should exclude entire groups of them because some of them have ones that you don't agree with. Okay, so that's basically making a blanket statement about Mexicans, about black people or whatever. I don't happen to agree with. I don't care if it's if it's racist. I don't care if it's not racist. I think it's inaccurate, and I think that for James Allsup to say this is not really, you're really just having a fatalist attitude. You're trying to believe that people can't choose their own belief system, and you can't convince them of why. You're trying to claim that you're not capable of convincing somebody that your belief system is better because they're a different race than you. So you're actually limiting yourself.
And 75% of Hispanics believe the government's priority with firearms should be gun control, not protecting the Second Amendment. Whites are the other way around. 75% of blacks and 72% of Hispanics believe that hateful speech is an act of violence. The minority of whites believe this. 70% of both blacks and Hispanics believe that.
Okay, so it goes through a whole laundry list of accurate statistics. These are people, and there's people on the left and the right who all they care about is polling and what people think. And they don't care about what's the actual answer of how to change their minds. He does not talk at all about the educational system in these schools where Mexican and other Hispanic students learn in the United States, or African American students may learn, that may influence their opinions. Okay, or the family values of them. If the certain families do, or lack of families don't. If people grow up in an environment, whether it's educational or home environment, where they preach a certain perspective, then yes, there's a likelihood people will grow up to believe a certain way, and some people end up abandoning it. It's a fact. Let's skip ahead here.
According to Ben, quote, there are crappy countries, but judging immigrants by their countries of origin is wrong. Quote, not all illegal immigrants should stay. Not all illegal immigrants should leave. Why can't we decide on a person-by-person basis? Quote, I would trade 100 million immigrants who don't take benefits for 100 million Americans mooching welfare today, but that's not the deal. I find that tweet in particular to be interesting. It shows how many neoconservative elites don't really see America as a nation of people. They see the United States as nothing more than an economic zone, and their political prerogative is maximizing GDP, not doing the right thing for the American people.
Okay, so James Allsup makes a point here, and he also kind of doesn't understand something that Ben Shapiro is saying that's true. Okay, there are a lot of people who come here as immigrants who have a value system that more closely aligns with the type of value system that Ben Shapiro or even James Allsup is talking about, the free markets and everything, than do many Americans who were born here. Okay, and I just gave an example. A lot of those people who he's talking about were born in the United States. A lot of these people who are minorities, who believe in social, in high welfare and everything, they're a lot of them were born here in the United States. A lot of them are minorities, and here's another secret: a lot of them are white people too. So who's to blame for that? I mean, it's really this is really the issue that I'm having here. But he is saying something that's true as well, James Allsup, which is that Ben Shapiro, for him, the issue is, it's just straight economics, it's brass tacks. The whole neocon thing, I think, is not really the issue here. I think Ben Shapiro certainly has some neoconservative qualities, but the issue is that he values the economic system over the people who are supposed to survive under it. Okay, I also happen to believe that capitalism is a better economic system. It does not mean that you just tell people, fuck off if you don't like a certain issue that's going on. In the end, this is a society where decisions are made in a social manner in many cases. Okay, you don't just get to build on. If you wanted to build a house on a road, you couldn't do it. It's a fact. That's something I accept, and therefore there are issues that are made at a social level, or there are issues that are settled at a social level. It doesn't mean every issue should be settled at a social level, but Ben Shapiro is basically saying I like 100 million people who don't want welfare benefits, and I'll trade them all of these other people that live here that I don't agree with. That's also a weak argument. So then he goes into this issue of Israel.
By Mr. Shapiro in 2003. He was about 20 years old at the time. To put that in perspective, he graduated UCLA at age 20 and wrote his first book in the same year. He had 2 books published by the age 21. So, before the comment section uses immaturity or youth as a defense for Mr. Shapiro, let's judge this column by the same standard we would use to judge someone with the same achievements at the same station in life: an up-and-coming intellectual, a published author, and a successful columnist. This isn't like citing some obscure thing some goofy kid wrote in college without knowing what they're doing. Shapiro was an established media figure when he wrote this column for townhall.com. The column focuses on the breakdown in peace talks between Palestinians and Israel. Quote, raise your hand if you were shocked at the breakdown of the so-called Middle East roadmap. If you're raising your hand, give yourself a nice hard slap across the chops. Maybe that will wake you up from your reverie of self-delusion. The roadmap was doomed from the start. The Arab enmity for Jews in the state of Israel allows for no peace process. The time for half measures has passed. Bulldozing houses of homicide bombers is useless. Instituting curfews in Arab-populated cities is useless. Roadblocks, tough fences, midnight negotiations, and ceasefires are useless. Some have rightly suggested that Israel be allowed to decapitate the terrorist leadership of the Palestinian Authority. But this, too, is only a half measure. The ideology of the Palestinian population is indistinguishable from that of its terrorist leadership. End quote. I am far from the world's foremost expert on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, but I do know enough about the history to know that peace is never going to be accomplished until a two-state solution can be reached. Israel stops their encroachment onto Palestinian territory, and Israel stops...
So this is Allsup kind of bringing his opinion. He does believe in the two-state solution, apparently, which I find a bit surprising for him. I would think, based on what I know about him, that he wouldn't care either way. And I actually, I think he says later that he doesn't care. But, the fact is that he does catch Ben Shapiro with his pants down here in a certain manner. Because you can't, on the one hand, say that the U.S., there's no issue of ethnicity. Yeah, it's all about values. If people come in with different values, but they're a different race, it doesn't matter. And then on the other hand, you go over to the Middle East and you say, well, because of these conditions, because of the Intifada, which was happening at the time of Shapiro's writing, because of terrorism, because of the brutality of this our adversaries, in that case the Palestinians, they have to be evicted. They can't be in this country. They don't share our values. Blah 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 blah. Yada yada yada. That's basically what Ben Shapiro is, and so he catches him in a huge contradiction. It's a contradiction that a lot of American conservative Zionists do get into, and I'm not using Zionism in a derogatory way. I'm just saying Shapiro happens. I believe he's a Zionist. I don't think he would object to me calling him one. And he sees Israel as a Jewish homeland, and as an observer of what's been happening in the Israel-Palestine conflict, his conclusion was that you have to solve that conflict by deporting all the Palestinians and Israeli Arabs from between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean Sea. And I would say that position is you can't reconcile both his position in the United States with respect to immigration here with the other position. But does the fact, so this is part one, okay? I think I'm going to cut it short here, but the question for the next part is this. Does the fact that Ben Shapiro is wrong about, has contradicted himself about his values as far as the United States versus his values as far as Israel are concerned, does that mean that James Allsup has assessed what's going on in the Middle East correctly? Does it also mean that his assessment of the demographic problems in the United States is correct? I would say that when you really look at this issue, and again, I respect these guys. I'm not afraid to tell people on the left or the right that I disagree with them, but I think that they have a lot of good points, and I've said that about Jamal Thomas and Jimmy Dore on the left, and probably a couple other people, and I'll say it also about Ben Shapiro and James Allsup. But in the next part, I will make the case that they're both kind of missing the point, and they're really, their definitions of the problem are kind of off base. Okay, so that's about it. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and also comment when it uploads. And I will try to film or record part 2 today. So I'll talk to you guys later.
Well, friends with the fancy persuasion.